Ladies and gentlemen, please silence your phones and hush your babies. The show is about to start.
I offer my personal welcome to this
Nemo
and Cole conference
halftime
show.
So here I was boasting about just how on time we were and how we went live the moment the conference ended, only to realise we'd been talking to the empty internet for 7 minutes due to some sort of technical glitch unknown to man or any kind of science. So welcome everyone to the Saturday evening session of the Nemo Co conference halftime show. I'll make all the cheesy jokes I made just to these two gentlemen and they can tell me if I deliver them as well this time. But this is brought to you by Club Mate, which is a German drink that is caffeinated, should we put it that way, so wouldn't be allowed on a BYU campus, but is helping me stay awake currently. It is 2:20 in the morning, and yeah, that is what's keeping me awake. I'm joined by Doug Vincent, the resident at this point. Irreplaceable is Doug, and then Colby was having such a good time last time, and he wanted to listen to conference so desperately again that he has come onto this show. And is going to be talking through this with us. But let's get to Jesus, Joe, or Russell, because that's what you're all really here for. And Russell is catching up. This session he had 11. Jesus only had 9. It's only 6 separating them. So tomorrow it is still anyone's game. Yeah. Right, I'm really glad we are actually live now and people are in the chat. This is excellent. It's late at night. I blame the late hour. But yes, so that's where we're at with that. This was a particularly Russell Nelson heavy session. So let's go to the... Oh, Doug wants to talk about something. He's already talked about it once, but he wants to talk about it again.
Yes.
Take
2, right?
Take 2.
Okay.
Take 2.
Tonight, I'm as British as I know how to be. Okay. I have my Elton John farewell tour cap on. Okay. But most importantly, I have official Nemo merch. Look at this. These are great t-shirts. The quality's great. You can buy them right off Nemo's site. And they shipped all the way from England right to me. So, yeah, you can just go in and order it and you'll get it.
What Doug hasn't told you is that next time I'm in the States, I'm going to go visit him with my camera and we're going to do a photo shoot. He's going to model the t-shirt for us.
That's right.
I'm
a plus-size model.
Hey, the merch does not discriminate at all. The merch is for everyone. So thanks for that. That is a horse, as you all saw, surrounded by what is, for legal reasons, a bathtub. It is not at all anything to do with the church's logo. Purely coincidental are the similarities. So before I get myself in any hot water through my sleep-deprived state, it's good we've got a lawyer here, isn't it, Colby?
Intervene, Colby. Necessary.
I think you got that bathtub line from me, didn't you?
Probably, yeah. Very probably. Thank you for the donations that are already coming in. They are very appreciated. And let's get on with the show, shall we? So we had just 4 talks today. And let's start with Elder Gary Sabin, who starts with a story about meeting a professor of happiness, which, who doesn't want that job, being a professor of happiness? It does show that academics will get paid to teach about literally anything at some universities. There is a teaching grant for basically anything somewhere. So I think University of Loughborough in the UK had meme studies at one point, legitimate university degree of meme studies. So there is something for everyone. But Sabin did the typical thing of, wouldn't you like to know the real answers to the truth and blah blah blah, and kind of comes at him with sharing. It's always a missionary moment. These general authorities can't bump into anyone in the street without trying to have a missionary moment. So it must be a nightmare to be their taxi driver, because we've heard of several taxi drivers already this session. There was a lot of second coming talk, both in this session more generally and just in conference all over. And then he very bravely decided to mention a scout camp. I think given recent events, it's very brave for any church leader to mention scout camps at this point, but it was a generally quite a nice story. He talked about how we need to go against the crowd. You can't be in the crowd and go with Jesus. So there was some more pushing down on the idea of us being different and special. I'm slightly distracted by the fact there's someone in the chat called Susan Bednar. And they're saying, I got a text saying 1 hour, why bother about a conference? So was this meeting only an hour, or did they randomly announce 1 hour church? No. This meeting was just 1 hour. It was the same last conference as well. The Saturday evening session, I think they've realized maybe they did it for me. Maybe they didn't want me to stay up too late. No, it wasn't that. I think they realized that it's a late session even in Utah. I mean, what time is it for you, Colby? You're that neck of the woods, right?
Yeah, I'm in Idaho, same time zone. I mean, it's only 7:30. It just looks a lot darker here.
Okay, but people want to go home, right? So I think that's why they started doing it. Then he told a possibly made up story about a man with a tattoo. Because frankly, if he's a gang member, I wouldn't be outing him at General Conference. I wouldn't be infuriating gang members. That's the last thing I'd want to be doing publicly. And then he said something really interesting. In God's eyes, kindness is synonymous with greatness. And it just makes me wonder, how kind are church leaders when they're talking about people outside the church? How kind are they to the people that leave, really? So that would be one for them to think of. And again, one of the easiest ways to identify a true follower of Jesus Christ is how compassionately that person treats other people. How compassionately does the church treat people on the outside? Not very often. I've got plenty of notes, but I think that's where we are for now. So, Doug, would you like to read us your notes? Tell us what you've got for this talk.
Sure. There was a quote there where he said that there's no way we can move with the crowd and also with Jesus at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was kind of division creating, the us and them kind of thing. Mm-hmm. He also made a bizarre comment about, I love the smell of tobacco in church because it means someone is trying to change. And I was just like, oh, that is so bad. Just so bad.
Talk me through what makes you uncomfortable about that, Doug.
Because it just seems kind of hypocritical to me. That we're judging somebody because they smell like tobacco. It means that they're trying to change. Is like, well, what if they just live with somebody who smokes? What if their spouse smokes? This is typical, Mormon policing type thinking, and you just saw it come right out of his mouth. And let's see, what else I have in here. He threw a smoke bomb in the great and spacious building and blamed that on everything. So, that kind of stuff didn't sit well with me. I was a little bit concerned because, it sounded like he had some kids with some severe health problems. So I hate to hear that, but that's really all the notes I have.
Okay. I think someone said something really good in the comments. They can barely show compassion to their own members. How can they show it to non-members? I think that's a really good point. He also said something really interesting. When nothing is expected and everything is appreciated, life becomes magical. It does, but you have a right to certain expectations, sort of like expectations of how the leaders of your church will behave towards you, how they will act with the money you entrust them with, etc., without getting too pointed. You have a right to certain expectations, but generally that can be a fairly decent philosophy. It leans sort of into an idea of stoicism, where you kind of let life happen to you and appreciate what happens. But yeah, that was just something that picked up. Colby, where are you at?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting to start with a story that definitely happened. These stories are told like so often in General Conference or at like BYU devotionals, and they're just like the most blatant Mormon power fantasy ever. Like, I talked to this non-member and he was a professor of happiness, and I told him, wouldn't you really like to know about true happiness? And in every one of these stories, they're always like stunned, and the implication is like they want to learn more. I noted the same thing that you did, Nemo, about Scout Camp. I even wrote down, the line, I think, from Office Space, didn't you get the memo? Like, we're not talking about scout camp anymore.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I noted the same thing about I wrote down the same quote. There's no way we can move with the crowd and also follow Jesus. And I just thought, okay, that's kind of a weird, particularly given like the division in the church right now over the whole Tim Ballard thing. That's kind of a weird message. The other thing I noted, not only was the tattoo man story definitely happened, but he pivoted from talking about this man's tattoos and how silly they were to immediately pivoting to, and we don't judge people. And I just thought, like, this is so blatantly contradictory. Like, you didn't see the fact that you're judging the man for having scary face tattoo on the back of his head, and then you say don't judge.
Yeah, he used it to get a laugh out of the audience, and then it goes, but we don't judge people. It's a great point, yeah.
Yeah, and the last thing I thought is, let's see, he's a general authority 70. So Elder Sabin, his talk for the most part was fine. Like, he told some stories about his kids. The story about his daughter was really kind of sad to me, because if a 16-year-old is facing possible death, it's one of those things where it's like, we see this strain in Mormonism of toxic positivity, and it very much felt that way to me. Like, either I'll be healthy, Dad, or I'm going to die at 16 and I'll be in such a better place. And there's just this part that's like that finding positivity in life is absolutely essential, I think, because it can be so difficult. But we also have to keep one foot in reality, that like we have to deal with hard things sometimes. And sometimes things are just unfair, and it's okay to recognize that. And so that was kind of my last thought, is like, this is like a lot of these 70 talks where it's like, it wasn't terrible. There were some weird things in it, I thought. But overall, I just thought, okay message, but like also just missing the other half of the story, which is like how to deal with hard times, how to acknowledge things that are unfair.
Now, 70 talks are like the Kinder eggs of like General Conference. You open them up and there's going to be a surprise in that. Wait, you guys can't have Kinder eggs in America, can you?
Oh, we absolutely have Kinder eggs.
Do you have Kinder eggs?
My kids love Kinder eggs.
Do they? Or is it Kinder Surprise? I can't remember. One of the Kinder products for a while, I think, was banned in the US. You couldn't like take it through
They
an
were like
airport or
certain
anything like
stores
that.
you could get them at, though.
Oh, okay. Okay, if you knew where to look. All right.
Back out.
We'll have a chat about that next time I'm in. Next time I'm in the States, I'll know where to go to get my fix.
Yeah, you just find the man with the head tattoo. They sell the Kinder eggs. Yeah.
I'm like, hey, 419. He's the man with my eggs. Okay,
I have no idea what they are.
You don't know what they are, Doug? Oh, they're a
They're
little
just
like chocolate egg with a toy in it. They're excellent. They're wonderful.
I'm a Cadbury kind of guy.
That I can't take umbrage with that at all. That's great. Let's talk about Joni L. Koch, I believe a Brazilian general authority. He's president of the Brazil area presidency as well. So he's, sitting on home turf. In fact, it was quite a Brazil heavy session tonight. 50% of the speakers were from Brazil. Because Suarez is also Brazilian. He is? Yeah, he's Brazilian. Yeah. There we go.
He's
See?
Brazilian.
Fun facts with Nemo at 2 a.m. Okay. We got from him an admission of his sort of hubris, as it were. I feel like this story is 100% true. Like there's some stories where you're like, no, that didn't happen. This story where he talks about how he wanted to take his daughters to his place of work. So, and I quote, to show them a place where, unlike our home, everyone would do what I ask of them without questioning me, which I thought was nice insight into his home life. That was a good joke. As we arrived at the front gate, which usually opened automatically when my car approached, I was surprised that it didn't open this time. The security guard basically asked him for ID, and he said, I've never needed ID before, and said, do you know who you're talking to? And the security officer said, well, since you don't have your ID, I don't know who you are, which is such a good slam. Such a good put down. And basically, he went home with his tail between his legs, apologized to the guard. His wife was cringing, his daughters were loving it, and he went home, got his ID. And he says he learnt a lesson. When we choose not to be humble, we end up being humiliated. So this was a talk all about humility. But then, what I'm going to say. he decided that he was going to explore how humble have we been in following the counsel of our prophet. Have we followed the prophet's counsel? Pop quiz. Do we mention the full name of the church in all our interactions? President Nelson said to remove the Lord's name from the Lord's church is a major victory for Satan. We're doubling down on that victory for Satan narrative. We're doubling down on the idea that if you use the word Mormon, then you're letting Satan win, even though Monson spent millions on the I'm a Mormon campaign. This is just Nelson having a massive chip on his shoulder. Your thoughts, guys, before I go too far in? Let's go with Colby first.
Yeah, I thought the same thing about the opening story. I also thought it was hilarious coming from a man with the last name of Cock that he, just tells this story about being humiliated. Do you know who you're talking to? I'm surprised. Well, I haven't watched the rest of the sessions because I only do this for you, Nemo. But if this guy doesn't get the PBK award for this session, I would be very surprised because I think there are 7 different things he mentioned that Nelson has specifically taught. Mm-hmm. The other thing I was surprised by is he brought up the brass serpent story and about how if the people would have just looked, they would have heard, they would have been healed. And that's just always interesting to me because those stories from the Old Testament where miracles happened like all the time, you usually don't hear those referenced a ton as like actual direct, like to be taken literally, I guess. And it sounded very literal to me in the way he was talking about it, because he was referencing that in connection with Nelson's, advice or directives, whatever you want to say. That was my takeaway is it's weird to talk about the brass serpent story like that makes any modicum of sense after we had 2 worldwide fasts from President Nelson that did nothing to stop COVID. And that was my takeaway.
Yeah. I think it's interesting there where he says, during this conference we've heard and will yet hear the unfailing counsel of our prophets and apostles. That is a bold claim. Unfailing counsel.
Didn't he also...
Can we hold him to that standard?
Wasn't there one point too where he was quoting Nelson and said, like, our beloved President Nelson has wisely counseled? And I just thought, like, it's not enough to, like, get the reference. You have to, like, add superlative on top of superlative. It's just like...
Oh, yes. Silly. Absolutely. He he does go on to say that sort of thing. I'm surprised we haven't had more even Russell M. Nelsons yet. We haven't had many of those. We might get this tomorrow. Doug, what are your takeaways from this talk?
I think that they're going to start asking as part of the temple recommend questions if you use the full name of the church or not. I think that's going to become the next temple recommend question. Yeah. It's to the point of just being ridiculous. He also was talking about in developing humility. He said, let our strong opinions be swallowed by an even stronger conviction that the Lord does speak through church leaders. And that's just, to me, doubling down on the leader worship and the infallibility stuff that we have such a problem with right now. I mean, he did have some really funny stories. I liked his stories, but there were some uncomfortable doubling down. He also at the end doubled down on covenants, and we've seen that through the whole conference as well. Lots of
so we're getting something from the chat here saying in Brazilian Portuguese that name is Coach, pronounced Coach.
I stand corrected. Yeah. If I can just address
your mind out, Toby.
If I can just address what Doug just said, that was one thing that really struck me about this talk is like the focus on humility. There's nothing wrong with being humble around other people, not being arrogant, not saying do you know who you're talking to? But at the same time, when it comes from church leaders, to me, it's very insidious because and we'll get to this, I think, when we talk about Suarez's talk, I kind of have the same read of it. It's very much like, you must humble yourself. Like, even when he asks about humbling yourself, it wasn't even humbling yourself to Christ or to God. It was, have you humbled yourself and followed the direction of President Nelson?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Suarez's talk, I would define it as rules for thee, but not for me. It's very much, and we will get to that. A couple of things I just want to. I felt called out when he started going after motivational speakers, writers, coaches, and influencers. Not gonna lie, I feel like I've been called out quite a bit by this conference. Maybe that's some would call that a guilty conscience. I would call that the fact that I'm getting somewhere. There's probably a little bubble on the chart with my name on it now.
Yeah, me and John.
But then he said he was in a taxi going to the airport to catch a short flight to a place where there was a very difficult situation to solve. Come on, man, tell me what that situation is. I want to know. The people want to know what this difficult situation you had to solve was. And it feels like an out, because normally they would say what it was they were having to do if they could then spin that thing into something positive. So chances are it was either something work related that you can't tell us, or it's something that was his fault and he had to almost go clean up his own mess and he doesn't want to have to admit to it. Something like that, because normally they would give us those details. Yeah, I just can't get over the fact that he said the unfailing counsel of our prophets and apostles. Unfailing. So let me get this straight. We were counseled to do the I'm a Mormon campaign. We were counseled to use that as a missionary tool. We were counseled to give out those pass along cards that said I'm a Mormon. That was prophetic counsel. That's not unfailing if we're now to believe Nelson. I think we really have you have to like really just repin that down, because so many people try and wiggle out of it. But this whole Mormon is a victory for Satan versus the unfailing counsel of prophets. Those two things do not work together, and it's you have to dig down constantly into that. Okay, before we go to what I think was possibly the best talk of the session, I think we need to talk about this. We need to talk about EXMO candles. Woo! And they are the proud sponsor of the Nemo & Co. conference halftime show. And this one is my one that if you buy on the website, I get some help financially from. I get a little bit of money, which is great. Amber, noir, jasmine, and vanilla husk, apparently. Smells awesome. So the problem is it doesn't have a name, and I need your help naming it. So if you've not been to the last two sessions, you know I'm putting a call out for names for the candle. Put them in the regular old comments so I can come back and check them later. But would love to hear what you think my candle should be called. Many people are saying it should just be called I Oppose. I think that's a decent one. We've just got Kolob's Revenge in the chat. But that's... yeah, they're the sponsors, so thanks to them. And thank you to those that have given donations so far. The link to my donor box is in the description. $5 or $10 a month really helps to keep this channel going and keep me punishing myself staying up late into the night to watch conference, so you all don't have to. Here we go. Let's talk about Tamara. Tamara W. Runia. Is that, I think that's how you say her name? Runia, I don't know. She still quoted Russell M. Nelson more than Jesus. 2-1 on that. She almost used the whole myopic thing, but she didn't actually say it. I was expecting her to use that, but that seems to have fallen out of vogue. But this talk generally, I think, was very good. I thought. She talked about the overview effect that astronauts experience when they're looking down on the Earth. And if we could all get a sense of that, that would help us. I think it gave me similar feelings to some of the things I felt when I read Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot. If those that haven't read that, check that out. That's his reflections on a photo of the Earth, where the Earth takes up less than a pixel on the screen, and it was taken by one of the probes. It was Voyager 2 as it left the solar system. They turned the cameras back and took a picture of the Earth, and it's caught on a ray of the sun that's bouncing off some of the metal on the probe. Anyway, that got really nerdy, but it's a really cool photo, and it really helps you understand the scale of the universe that we exist in.
If I can add a little,
please,
here across the pond, our latest director of NASA was sworn in, instead of on a Bible, was sworn in on a copy of Sagan's Pale Blue Dot, which I thought was very
wow.
That was cool.
That's good. That's good. So, yeah, she seems like I looked up her professional background. She worked in Parks and Rec, which instantly gets me thinking of the TV series. But she was a journalism graduate. So She knows how to speak. She knows how to put herself across.
Mhm.
And that was all very obvious from her talk. She talked. This one was really good. She said, during the week, I found myself making lists in my mind of things I could remind my children of on Sunday, like maybe try and help out more with the kids when you're home, or don't forget to be a good listener. When I heard Brother Maxwell's comments, I threw away the lists and silenced that critical voice. When I saw my grown children for just that brief time each week, I focused on the many positive things they were already doing. Before we interact with a loved one, we can ask ourselves the question, is what I'm about to do or say helpful or hurtful? That, on its own, in isolation, outside everything else, that is just good advice. That is just good advice, and I'm glad to hear just some sensible good advice coming across that pulpit. And of course, it was shoehorned in late into the evening session, but nevertheless, I think that should get a lot of attention. And the quote, "You will be loved for the rest of your life, no matter what." That's what we should be saying to our children.
Yes.
Hopefully, Gong in particular was listening to that, and some bridges can be built with his son, and Elder Oaks and his grandson. Again, like, I think some of this really should be listened to by the men in the red velvet chairs. That they should be way more tolerant and yeah. When it says our words are our superpowers and family members are like human blackboards standing in front of us saying, write what you think of me. I think that idea, our words are our superpowers, maybe Russell Nelson shouldn't be calling people lazy learners and lax disciples, perhaps. When he has a sort of ecclesiastical duty of care to his global congregants. But that's rich of me to say because I call them liars all the time when they're lying. So, maybe I need to take some of this advice as well. Doug, what were your thoughts on this talk?
I had much the same thought. I really enjoyed her talk. There was no primary voice, number one. That was good. She talked like a normal person. I thought she had cool stories. Those quotes that you just threw out there, I thought were just absolutely the best. She could have just said, "Name of Jesus Christ, amen," and sat down, and we would have been perfectly fine, because I think those are some of the most important messages of the conference so far. She talked about the vulnerability of humans, and that our words are one of our superpowers, and family members are like human blackboards. That is so true, and especially kids. If you tell them they're bad, then they're going to believe they're bad. And then her mantra of love that you brought up, I thought that was totally awesome. She also said something else that I thought was important. She said, let's admit it, in a fallen world, there's no way to be a perfect spouse, parent, son or daughter, grandchild, mentor, or friend, but a million ways to be a good one. Again, just common sense stuff that we need to hear way more of in the church, about relationships, about our own self-image, the way we think of ourselves. This was an anti-scrupulosity talk, which is, not the norm. Usually we're fighting that scrupulosity thing. Another great quote that I got down: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
I believe that's an African proverb.
Okay,
of some kind, which is cool.
Wherever it came from, it just, that's perfect. So that's my take.
Yeah. I really like, I've circled I had it Tuesday, because she talks about this feeling when we feel like, oh, we're not doing good enough or whatever. And for her to say, yeah, I had it the other day, I think is, that's powerful coming from someone that people are going to be looking up to say, yeah, I get these things too. Colby, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I do largely agree with both of you that I think this was the strongest and, like, by far the strongest talk of the entire conference. There were a lot of really good messages in it, I thought. The only real problem I had with this talk, and again, I'll connect this with Suarez's when we talk about it in a minute, is that it was really good advice, but it was all wrapped in telling, like, someone in authority telling you your story. And it was all about the eternal perspective, was all about, one of the things she said at one point, she said something along the lines of, like learning a new vantage point can change everything, because she was talking about, that perspective being out, the astronauts being out away from the Earth. And I just thought, but then she like pivoted in the talk about how you need to stay at the tree of life and just keep eating the fruit and invite other people to do it. It's like, but wait a second, like, do you want people to have a new perspective or don't you? Because one of the things I've experienced is that, and I know people will disagree with this, some people, is that Mormonism is very infantilizing. It's a little bit like it keeps you in a certain box. And so I thought there were parts of her talk that were weirdly contradictory on that. I thought it was interesting that she quoted Neil A. Maxwell, given that that's supposedly one of the dead leaders that was communicating with Tim Ballard's psychic. And I just thought that's, again, kind of just an odd person to choose to quote. But since I've been negative, I do want to say I really liked her talk as far as advice for dealing with especially adult kids, because I thought that was a very good message to not fault find, to try and correct when it's necessary, but to not spend all the time, sniping. And I loved the line about the power of words, because I do think that's true. So I think there were a lot of good things. I just wish that it would have been more focused on people finding and telling their own story, instead of these leaders who don't know you from Adam telling you your story and telling you that you have this eternal role to play and telling you that you need this eternal perspective. If people want to choose that, I think that's absolutely appropriate for their life. But it's never really given as a choice inside of Mormonism.
I think it's the best you could hope for from a top-down authoritarian regime, right?
I think so. Yeah. But the message overall was good.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think it's the best message you could hope for when it is a regime that relies on people being told things from the pulpit. So I'm happy. I'm content with it. And I thought, okay, this is gonna be great. And then you get to Suarez's talk. And Suarez's talk becomes a game of how many things can I say that we don't do that we want you to do. That's what this becomes a game. Because he starts with, our dear prophet Russell M. Nelson declared, I call upon our members everywhere to lead out in abandoning attitudes and actions of prejudice. In this top-down authoritarian system, it is actually you, the leaders, who need to lead out on that, and the members will follow, because you don't actively empower members to make their own decisions about matters of prejudice. For example, their tolerance of gay people, their tolerance of LGBTQ people, like their tolerance of those communities is very much based on the attitude of the leaders of the church. So actually, they're the ones that need to lead out, and that's the theme through all of this. He goes on to say, President Nelson further emphasized the importance of spreading dignity and respect for our fellow beings when he stated, the creator of us all calls on each of us to abandon attitudes of prejudice against any group of God's children. Okay, so is the church going to abandon its attitudes of prejudice towards gay people and their right to be married, etc.? Probably not. Any of us who has prejudice towards another race needs to repent. Yeah, but it's not just race, is it? And that's where they've tried to shoehorn that onto one thing and make it a race issue, because they can say, oh, look, well, we abandoned that in 1978. Yeah, but they still haven't apologized for it. He talks about the tale of a rabbi. That's really touching. I liked the inclusion of that, about how do you know when the sun's rising, when you can see the face and call them brother or sister. Then he goes on to say, he talks about...
on there.
Sorry?
That's where he's kind of slipped up.
Yeah. Quite cool, because he said her, and I think the entire tale of the rabbi includes a man and a woman. I think your brother and your sister. But because the auto cue had probably gone like this, he then jumps in at her or his face, and you're like, but you only mentioned the man before. But I think that was just a slip up. I think.
I wrote down transgender faux pas.
I've just got, when he talks about Christ, he says, he denied none, but treated them with equity and love, for he saw them as his brothers and sisters, sons and daughters of the same father. Well, the church denies people. So again, why is he telling us that we need to follow this example of denying none? Talks about those that believe in inferiority of those that are different from them. Again, Oakes, I'm pretty sure, holds that position. That, and other more prejudiced leaders of the church. Before I take all the good stuff, Colby, tell me what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of thoughts on it. I actually thought that the talk, kind of the way you've addressed it, Nemo, the theme of it wasn't about real acceptance. It wasn't really about pluralism. It was about assimilation. So the entire talk was about, following this example that supposedly the church has said or the church leaders have said, and they just haven't. Like you highlighted, like there is still prejudice in the church. Like literally just this week, it's been reported in national news that BYU was harassing one of the members of the Black Menaces, and like that's where it just gets so frustrating. Like for me to watch General Conference because the messages sometimes aren't terrible. Like it's not bad to ask people to do away with prejudice. I agree with that message wholeheartedly, but it's just such weird advice coming from the group and the authoritarians that give this advice. It's very puzzling to me.
Yeah.
And yeah, the assimilation part just really bothers me because it's like you can really only find community in Mormonism if you're willing to assimilate. And I just don't believe that is consistent with the message that Jesus delivered and the message that he's quoting from Jesus. And so that always just bothers me. I do think that it's good that the church is openly advising members to take steps against prejudice. And so I always want to be very careful when I speak out against it, because that is a good thing. Because in the Mormonism I grew up in, I was born in the 80s. And so growing up where I did in a conservative place in the Mountain West, like I knew people who were super racist. And so I like that they are explicitly saying that members should abandon prejudice, but they really need to get on the same page and determine how they can make room for people who don't fit in the church's current box, because it's going to happen at some point, and they just need to do away with this hypocrisy, do away with this double-mindedness, and just let it go, and let people who want to be part of this organization truly find a place. Not assimilation, not just acceptance if you're willing to agree to the terms, but real community, real pluralism. It can work. And I think, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
They don't have many people that really want to be part of this community, so they can't really afford to be turning people away at this point. I wouldn't have thought, The quote of his I actually put on screen before we go to Doug. There is no place for prejudiced thoughts or actions in the community of saints. Absolutely agree. But the problem is, doctrinally, there are still prejudiced thoughts and actions involved in the community of saints. They've got to address the prejudice inherent in the religious system. So I agree with you, Colby. I don't want to stop them saying this. I want them to say this and then take it seriously and take steps to make it mean something. That's what I want from them. Doug, what are your thoughts?
Well, I wrote down DesNat because I just thought the optics of all this was kind of odd. So you have Elder Suarez, who's obviously not a white person. He's a Latino of some kind. I don't know exactly how you categorize people from those different countries, but anyway, he could be perceived as somebody that was not non-white. And I just thought, the DesNat crazies in the church are probably foaming at the mouth seeing this guy stand up there and tell them not to be prejudiced. So there's that kind of weird object that just kind of hit me on that. I mean, I am grateful that he very explicitly requoted some of the anti-prejudicial statements that President Nelson has made. I think by and large, that is kind of rings hollow when the church has not apologized for the temple and priesthood ban. I just don't see how they can completely get over that hump and say, yeah, we did it. We've overcome it without doing that. You had Dallin Oaks double down on, some of the supposedly discontinued theories of why the curse was instituted. He says, I don't know, but hey, if the brethren agreed to it, then it must have come from God, And to me, we're spinning our wheels. We're not making even though President Nelson got this big award and they wanted to make a big deal out of that, I have no idea how they picked him for that award. I mean, he has done some good things. I'm not trying to take anything away from him, but until the church as a church has addressed its horrible racial policies of the past, I just don't see how they can claim any space here. That's me.
Yeah, no, I get that. I understand that, and I think we're all kind of coming to that same conclusion that this is all great. The church just needs to step up and make it actionable, make it, something that it needs to permeate down into the membership. And I think it's going to take a bit of time, but they can be the ones to lead out in it. And that's why I didn't like the fact that Suarez was encouraging members to lead out. Actually, these men need to actually step up and be leaders. They claim to lead this organization, but they don't. If they want to actually step up, then that's if they want to actually affect change, then they need to step up. So that's it. That was the evening session of conference. We survived just about. I think just about made it. So thank you everyone for joining us. It is 3 a.m. I'm gonna go to bed. I'm gonna get some sleep, and I will see you all tomorrow. So make sure you like this video on your way out. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss what we're doing tomorrow. We've got some great guests lined up, and we're going to be going over the last 2 sessions of conference. And we can see if my prediction streak holds up. I'll probably get them wrong tomorrow. So I will see you all then. Have a great night. And take care. Bye, everyone.